here, buddy? All right, Jay Fletch, thank you so much for jumping on. Winning strategies. I'm going to share my screen for the presentation that we put together. Let's see here.
Well, and I first want to say it's an honor. When I got into real estate, when I got into coaching, never really thought I would be speaking to anybody, speaking to any groups. It's not something I seek out. I know there's a lot of coaches, there's a lot of people that they're seeking out speaking engagements and whatnot. I really do this as a way to give back, because my business really looks like two distinct periods of time. 18 years I sold real estate prior to getting involved in coaching, and then the last 9 years involved in coaching, and they've completely different businesses, completely different benefits, completely different blessings for my life. So first I want to say, thank you for having me. And the second thing I want to say is, I don't have a lender in my marketplace that does things like this. What I mean by that is, when you can find a lender that is going to support your business and bring you tips and tactics and bring you high-level agents, I would be signing up for these things all left and right, because I'm constantly looking for a better mousetrap every day. So I want to say that's a credit to Cross Country for doing that. So, please don't think that's lightly, because it's a big deal. So we're going to talk about how to get your offers accepted. We're going to talk about how to get some more business. I think it all starts really with the relationship. And when you look at this, there's a lot of tactics out there about how to get your offers accepted, a lot of them. But I think what's really, really missed is the old saying, people like to do business with people they know, like, and trust. And that goes for as far as a listing agent, buyer agent relationship. I would rather work with another agent that I know, like, and trust on every transaction than work with an agent I've never experienced. I don't know what their phone number is, don't know what their family's like, don't know if they just got in the business, don't know if they know how to write a purchase agreement or don't really know how to write a purchase agreement. So the first really tactic is build a relationship with the agents in your marketplace. Now, this isn't going to get you deals tomorrow. This is a long-term end game strategy. So prior to doing this, you have to make a decision. Are you in this business for the long run, or are you in this business short term? If you're in this business for the long run, you're going to do, say, and act accordingly. I knew when I got into real estate, I was doing it forever. Even though I knew that, I was one of the worst people to work with in the first 3 to 7 years of my career. I looked at every agent as a competition. I looked at every agent as, man, how'd they get that deal? How'd they get that buyer? How'd they get that seller? I'm better than that agent. And the minute I started treating every agent as a colleague, and I started treating them as vital to my success, and I started sending them a thank you card every time they showed my property. I started sending them a thank you card and a small gift every time we put a deal together. I started calling them and giving them honor and respect, calling them and basically forward, using family, occupation, recreation, dreams, finding out a lot about them. I'm telling you, overnight, my business changed. It changed overnight, because now people are submitting offers and I already have a relationship with them. So when you have a relationship with somebody that's submitting an offer, it's a lot easier to get what your client needs, and it's a lot easier to work with the other buyer agent on the other side of that. So the first for real tactic is you have to start developing relationships with these agents. It has to be consistent. It has to be methodical. It has to be planned, and you have to continuously do it. I would look at your calendar. If you look at my calendar, in my calendar, I've got 2 hours blocked off each week for building relationships with real estate agents, appraisers, lenders. And really, a lot of these lenders, a lot of these lenders, I might not necessarily be working directly with them, but I still want them to know my name. And a lot of these agents, I know at some point in time, they're probably going to submit an offer on one of my listings, or I'm going to be submitting an offer on one of theirs, or my team is going to be working with them. So I want to make sure that relationship is there and that relationship is substantial. So the beauty about this is when you get an offer that comes in, and when I get an offer that comes in and it's from an agent that I already have a relationship with, I can sit down with confidence with my seller and say, hey, Diane sent this offer over there. She's never failed me before. You know, I know a lot about her. She's got a couple of kids. Like, to know about that agent and that trust is huge. So that's important. The other side about this, yeah, go ahead.
No, when you're done with this piece, Jay, I want to loop back on a few topics that you mentioned.
Yep. The other part of this is when the listing, the market's constantly changing, right? Right now, the listing agents have a lot of the pull, a lot of the control in the process. So when the listing agent gives you offer submittal instructions, follow them. Jump through the hoops, play the game, do the dog and pony show. When we have listing instructions out there, it's primarily to create a smooth and successful transaction. And also keep in mind, a lot of times you're going to be working, when you have a dominant listing agent, you're probably going to be working with one of their staff members more often than the agent. My cell phone rarely rings. It's as crazy as it sounds. It rarely rings because a lot of people go right to Mandy, and so they develop a relationship with Mandy as well. So Mandy's takes the offer in. Mandy's one that packages up for me. She's the one that packages up for the client. She's the one that's putting it all together. She's highlighting it. She's marking it up. So if you can submit the offer in a friendly way, you're going to have a leg up right off the get-go because Mandy has some influence on how I receive the offer. So what were you wanting to circle back to?
So a few things, Jay, you had mentioned, so first things first,
Yep.
you know, when you and I kind of connected to go over this conversation here, you know, you had mentioned that the relationship with the realtors in your market, with the appraisers and lenders in your market is ongoing.
Yes.
One of the questions I asked you, Jay, was, are you using it to recruit other agents? And correct me if I'm wrong, but you said, no, I'm good with my team. My team is great. It's fantastic, but I'm doing this for the future, right?
Yes.
Okay.
So a couple tactics around that.
Mhm.
I tried to have lunch with one appraiser every week. And I see a lot of appraisers' names. So here's what happens inside our little team. We have a home on the market. When appraisal's ordered, they have to set up a showing to get into the property, right?
Mhm.
We automatically, whether it's me or Mandy or one of my other staff members, we automatically take that information and we put it on an Excel sheet if we don't have their name. The Excel sheet is printed off for me and we just go right down the list. And I try to have lunch once a week with one appraiser. So right now there's 97 names on the sheet. So it'll take me 2 years basically to go through that whole list. And I just go right down. And let's say Jeff is one of the appraisers. I say, hey, Jeff, can we get together this week and have lunch? What works better for you, Wednesday or Friday? And really all I'm trying to do is I'm trying to ask questions about their job and letting them vent about things that are struggling. And then I ask them questions like, what can I do as a listing agent to make your job easier? So one of the things we do is we put together a very detailed home details property book now. And one of the things we do is we spend the extra money to get the floor plans done up. So now the appraiser has the floor plans prior to even going to the house. That's one thing that can save them job, especially in our marketplace when it's 10 below, 15 below sometimes. They don't want to walk around the house in 3 feet of snow at 15 below. So I like to have these lunch meetings basically asking them, what can I do as a listing agent to make your job easier? What do you guys count for value? The beauty behind this is I always offer up my phone number and I can say, hey, call anytime if you're struggling to get one done. And I'm one of the first phone calls most of these appraisers make. And I know I'm saving deals for my competitors. I'm saving deals for my competitors. I get it. But here's the thing. It almost always gets back to them that the appraiser looked to our outside help and they called me. I can't tell you how many times a competing realtor called me and said, hey, I heard you helped the appraiser come up with some comps on my listing. I just wanted to say thank you for that. Oh yeah, you're welcome. It's a long-term game. So as far as agents, thank you card absolutely 100% every time they get an offer. I would even go as far as to say you should do every time you get a showing, but you know, we kind of tailed back on the showing, especially when some of our listings were getting 40, 50 showings. It just wasn't manageable. But no matter what, if you write an offer on one of our listings, I send you a thank you card, and I usually send you a $5 Starbucks card. Whether it gets accepted or not, whether it's a low ball offer, whether it's completely ridiculous. Because I'm basically saying, hey, I appreciate that you took the time to go show this home, answer questions, write an offer on it. If showings slow down, we will go back to doing a thank you card after every showing. It's just one of those things. And then I'm over the top on honor and respect when it comes to these agents. I'm just over the top on it. I mean, we have a development opening up, and I've got 86 listings that are going to be in this one development. I had an agent call me this morning. Her name is Terry. And she goes, hey, I just want you to know, I've got like 4 or 5 buyers for that development. And she goes, I'm going to push them all your way. I'm like, cool. She goes, I'm just going to send you their name and phone number. And she goes, I'm going to let you follow up with them. I'm going to let you call them. I'm going to let you sell them. Now, she wouldn't do that if she didn't trust me to pay her. Like, I don't need a compensation agreement to pay some of these agents. If they have a shoestring of a claim, I want to take care of that agent. Because if I take care of that agent, they'll push my listings. Another thing too is I pay a little bit more than everybody else in my marketplace, by the way. So if you're in my marketplace and you see commission rates of 2.4, 2.5, 2.6 as pretty common practice, now you can't fix commission rates, but I will always tell a seller, hey, I charge 6%, but I think we should write it up as 6.3, and then let me take that additional 0.3 of a point, and let's put it on the buyer side. Let's compensate these buyer agents that are showing your property. They're like, why do we want to compensate them? You know, because they're showing way more properties and way longer, and they're making way more offers, and they're not getting. I go, right now, when you're working for the buyer, it's just a lot more work. I just like to get them compensated. But if you do this over a long period of time, you get a reputation. People go, oh, it's one of Jay's listings. Let's go show it. He pays better. He sends me a gift card. He appreciates my time. All these things matter, especially when you do it over for a long period of time.
Jay, the one thing that I hear coming through from you is that you're creating yourself as a partner in the market, not a vendor and not a competitor. So you're not a competitor to your agents that you work with in the market, and you are not treating appraisers and lenders as vendors. You're treating them as partners.
Correct. And here's what I know: if you do the right thing and you do it long enough, you'll be rewarded. And it doesn't matter if it's tomorrow or if it's a month from now, 10 years from now. At the end of the day, if you do the right thing, it doesn't matter how long it takes, you'll be rewarded. And it's something I've really worked hard on probably the last 14 years. And these last 3 years, I've really seen the fruits of it come to fruition. But it takes time. I've got it in my calendar, 1 appraiser every week. I also have it in my calendar, contact 5 agents per week. Now, those aren't lunch, those aren't coffee. They may turn into that, but really it's in my calendar, 5 agents per week I call. Now, here's the other thing I have. And if you haven't done this, I think you're missing out huge, especially on the selling side. I have every agent in my marketplace based on city on an Excel database. I have their work mailing address, I have their email, I have their cell phone, I have a lot of home addresses. And when I go into a listing presentation, when I'm talking to that seller, I tell the seller point blank, There is nobody in my marketplace that can get to the agent community faster than I can, because I've already set up all the databases. I mail to the agents. I mean, here's another thing, take a look at. I hired Kendra, who's our senior coach at the core. I hired Kendra, flew her in, rented off a really fancy room, gave away $10,000 of coaching and gifts and tickets from my own pocket. And I had 235 agents show up. I paid for all of it as an agent. And people ask me, why would you do that? And I'm going, because if I can get Kendra in here and help these agents be better, the old saying is, in a high tide, all ships rise. In a high tide, all ships rise. It's just I'm telling you, we've got to practice differently, because if we do, we'll never be without business. Because people will go out of their way to find you. People, I mean, like, agents go out of their way to find a way to work with me. And here's the other tip. Call the high-level listing agents when you got a buyer. Because I'll tell you right now, we have 14 listings in a coming soon period or withhold period. So we have 14 listings we haven't released to the rest of the world. I would say on average, I get anywhere from 3 to 6 calls per week from agents calling me up and saying, hey, Jay, I've got somebody around 550. They'd like at least an acre. They'd like to be in St. Croix County, one level. Do you have anything coming up? And I'll look at it and go, yeah, I have one on 142nd Street. You want to drive by it, see if it's going to work for your client? If it does, I can get you in there before we even go on the market. I mean, this stuff it's game changing if you take this approach to it.
So a few things, Jay, I want to touch on before we move to the next slide. One of the things that you have listed here is making sure you're submitting the offer the way the listing agent wants it, making sure it's friendly, and making sure you're playing by their rules. I will tell you, I was just involved in a transaction. Buyer's agent went in. I knew the listing agent. Of course, we made the phone call to the listing agent. The listing agent literally said to me, Jay, I won't even look at this offer because, I mean, obviously she's going to look at it, right? She has to on behalf of her seller, but she's giving it much less merit because it was sent to her in pieces, like in literal pieces, like 6 different emails. And like for me as a lender, I'm thinking to myself, man, I just spent, however many hours pre-approving the customer and guiding them through. Now I'm looking at the time that I've actually spent that's now not going to help because it's not submitted. And while this might sound like a very easy thing, often forgotten.
Well, you know what the saying is, ships don't sink for the water outside the boat. They sink from the water inside the boat. And the smallest hole can sink the largest ship. And you're absolutely right. I mean, I've been on the other side of that so many times, you cannot believe it. I would tell you this, type the offer instead of handwriting it. I don't care how good your handwriting is, type the offer. Because here's why. If you sit down and type the offer, A, I can read it. B, it shows me you're a professional. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I'll get a handwritten offer. I can't read the words. It's chicken scratch. They did it in blue ink. So when they send it to me, it's really like super light gray. And then it's $1 million home. And I'm going, I can't even read your offer. I don't know if that says 8,000, 5,000, or 6,000. I can't read it. So if you take the time to type the offer, that carries a lot of weight. And in my case, you're absolutely right when you talk about submitting all of it in one packet. Like, look at your core homework. How's your core homework has to be?
One packet.
One packet, legal size. And people think that we do stuff in the core, we think we're archaic and there's no thought behind it. There is a thought behind the homework. The homework needs to have the cover sheet. Then your homework. It needs to be in one scanned PDF. It needs to be on legal paper. We don't want rolling over in different papers, all this other thing. If you think about it, we're trying to train our students to submit their offers that way. I mean, how many people send a cover letter with their offer? I mean, you guys send cover letters with all the details about their financing, right?
Yeah, we have cover letters that we use that can address the address and that sort of thing. Absolutely, 100%. And then our pre-approval letters are pretty detailed with loan amount, LTV, purchase price, names, obviously all the good stuff.
And I'm telling you, it makes a difference because a lot of times when I'm sitting across the table from a seller, here's what I tell the seller. I say, look, here's the thing. My job isn't necessarily to look for what's on this offer. My job is to look for what they're not telling us. And the first place I look at what they're not telling us is if the offer doesn't coincide and match what the lender's telling me. So if the lender's telling me, hey, this is a really solid client, they've got enough money set aside, they don't even need the loan. And then I'm looking at the offer and it's a rural development loan with 100% financing. I'm going, okay, wait a minute here. I'm confused. And when the agent's confused, they cannot express it to their client that well as well. So I mean, I think and that leads us into how many of you are getting your lender involved right up front? Like how many is getting the lender to call the listing agent? How many companies calling? Well, even let's back up. Is that, are you calling the listing agent? Because there's about 90% of the things I can knock out on just about every one of my listings if you call me ahead of time. Let's just even cover the basic.
So Jay,
when does your sellers want to close? Yeah.
So Jay, let's back up to speaking with the listing agent.
Yeah.
You're a large listing agent. Some of the buyer's agents or some of the agents that work with buyers and sellers, when they call the listing agent, they can be very good at extracting data from the listing agent that will help them position the offer, right? So just, if you don't mind, park on there for a second and talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, so if you call me, I already know that I already know some things the sellers are looking for. And sometimes it's just more money. And I'll tell you that. I'll say, hey, look, this seller is really just looking to get paid. You know, money's going to be great. A lot of times I'm saying, okay, well, it's going to be a combination of money and terms. Here's the terms they want. Like any seller, they would like to see less contingencies, no inspection, no appraisal or appraisal gap coverage to cover the difference. But if you really get them talking, you continue to ask a question. And here's the key. Ask a question, and whatever the answer is, repeat the answer back in another question leading into your next question. So if I say, hey, what's important to your seller? Is it just money? And then I come back and say, yeah, it's just money. Okay, so just money. So they're looking for more money, or does it matter if they want more money if it closes sooner, or less money if it closes later? So you can continuously deep diving. You're going to need to ask 5 to 7 questions before you will start to get to what the seller really wants. And if you can find out what the seller really wants, or better way to say it, if you can find out what's important to the seller, but not important to the buyer, that's where you win.
So it's ask and listen, ask and listen, ask and listen. And, you know, even on the lending side, we're doing that as well, right?
Can we turn that up?
Obviously, interest rates are important, right? We know every single client wants a great interest rate, but do they want to close quickly? Do they want to have a quick commitment date? Whatever it may be. So asking and listening. And while it may sound simple to call and speak to the listing agent, it's not just a call and say, hey, an offer's coming in, right? But it's poking and prodding a little bit to get deeper with that listing agent. And of course, if you start with number one and you have that great rapport with that agent, that obviously helps tremendously.
And if you ever start stumbling on this conversation, I would quickly switch to as if you're talking to your friend. So if the listing agent feels like they're starting to tense up, or they don't want to give any more information, or they're trying to start stonewall you, then switch gears and start asking about their business, their family, what's working, and switch gears, and then come back to the property. I recently had one where the agent called me, and I'll tell you, I had the offer, so it had eight offers on it. This agent submitted an offer, and based on the offers, I have nothing to do with this agent's offer. But he's the only agent of the 8 that called me. So he calls me, I take the call, we talked a little bit about the offer, and then he goes right into my daughter. He goes, hey, by the way, he goes, your daughter, Lucia, man, she's gotten way better, way fast. And I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, well, I saw her when she did Tinkerbell in the play about 6 months ago. And then I just saw her yesterday in Lady Pirates of the Caribbean. And she's really coming into her own. And she's like, what are you doing? And so then I go into, jokingly, I go into, well, that's where a lot of my money goes. That's why I got to keep listing properties, because she has a stage coach. She has a voice coach. Now, here's a real estate agent in my marketplace who has a kid that's in the same theater program my daughter is, and I had no idea. I didn't even know who he was. And the reason why I didn't know who he was, his license is held at a brokerage an hour and 20 minutes away, but he lives in my hometown. And so he would never made it on my list of agents to develop a relationship with based on where his license is. But he starts talking about my daughter, and then I recognize who his kid is. And we start talking about the theater program. So then I go present the 8 offers. Again, his offer is not in the running, not even close. I'm talking to the seller and I go, you know what? I think we can go back to this offer here. I connected with this guy. So I went back and I just told him, I said, here's what I need to see. I need to see this, and this. If you can make it work, great. If you can't make it work, I understand. He resubmitted about 20 minutes later, and his is one of the offers we took.
Yeah.
It makes a difference.
Well, he went above and beyond, and he created the relationship and the trust and made it happen.
And he found my kryptonite, right? We all have kryptonite. My kryptonite is my daughter. He found it.
So let's go to the lender piece that you started to segue into. We ask our agents when they put in an offer to let us know so we can get a call into that listing agent. And I will tell you, we don't often get the heads up, hey, Jay or whomever, please call the listing agent. And it may seem a little trivial, but I can tell you, I've personally gotten feedback saying, hey, you're the only lender that called. When I go talk to my seller, I'm going to tell them that I spoke to you and you talked about the client. Now, obviously, we don't release confidential information. We keep it high level. But Jay, you as a listing agent, we talked about having your pre-approval ready, making sure it matches the offer, right? A cover letter, which we can use, and we do use a cover letter. But just talk a little bit about that, and then I want to touch on Cross Country's fast track approval.
I would tell you this, 90% of the time when I get a phone call from a lender, the phone call really goes like this. The phone call really goes like this: red light, green light. These guys good to go? You've looked at everything? That's usually my first question. My second question is usually, are you going to close on time? And so that's usually my first 2 questions. Now from there, I'm only going to really kind of ask questions if I see discrepancies between the cover letter, pre-approval, and offer. Or I'm gonna just dig a little bit deeper and say, hey, they made their offer not subject to a home sale, but I'm looking at your conditions, and one of your conditions is there's a home sale in here. Do they need to sell this? Do they not need to sell it? But I like having this conversation. You are absolutely right. I probably think if I had to put a number to it, I bet it's 1 out of every 20 offers I'll hear from a lender.
And I will say, some of our lenders are having us call, or some of our realtors are having us call as the lender, but not on every single transaction.
And I think it should be on every single transaction. And here's why. Even if it's a slam dunk, because what you want to do is you want to get into a continuous process. Because look at it this way. If you sell 200 homes a year, one of the questions I always ask my students is this: did you deliver one experience 200 times? Or did you deliver 200 separate experiences? The better you can deliver one experience 200 times, the more money you're going to make, the more successful you are, the smoother the process is, the more easier it is to get referrals. This is businesses like Chick-fil-A, McDonald's, right? You can get a cheeseburger in Minneapolis. You can get a cheeseburger in China. You can get a cheeseburger on the East Coast and it's going to be the same, right? It's 2 pickles, splash of ketchup, cheeseburger, cheese and burger, right? It's the same. That's what you want to do with your real estate business. You want to try to have one experience that you can deliver it multiple times. Having the lender, getting the lender involved to call on your buyer experience is vital. And so, because here's what happens. If you have a friend, so let's say the lender calls on one of your buyers and that offer gets accepted. And now that person's over the top excited about your service. You were great to work with. They go and tell their friend, hey, you've got to work with my lender. Here's what my lender did. My lender actually called the listing agent and talked to the listing agent and told them I was good to go. The money was there. And now you start working with that buyer because you got that referral. They're expecting that. And if you don't do it every single time, now you just limit yourself from having another referral. Whatever you decide to do, make sure it's consistent and repetitive. It should be like Groundhog's Day.
Have one process, not many.
Yes.
All right.
I think the buyer call and lender is vital, especially if you guys got some of these programs you guys have. I mean, cross country's got the fast track approval. You guys are talking about, some guarantees, your reputation of closing on time, reputation of closing. I think that's got to be talked, because you can talk them out of another offer. You can say, hey, do you really want to use that online lender that has over 6,000 bad reviews that they didn't close on time? Or do you want to take a little bit less money and work with my guy who will get it done every time, on time? There's value in that.
Yeah, so little plug here for cross country and the fast track approval. That's our fully underwritten approval. Jay, I will tell you, we do, I hate to use the word push, but we do push our buyers to go through the fast track approval process. Oftentimes they don't want to. We need actually realtor support on this, because if you're going in with multiple offers on one property, you could have 2 or 3 that are same price, different contingency periods. But if you can say, my buyer's actually been underwritten by the human that will sign off on the property, and they only need 4 things: appraisal, title, contract, and insurance. It's not clear to close, Jay, but it's pretty darn good, especially with the appraisal.
And we haven't even mentioned this, but this is a big component of that lender realtor relationship. If I'm submitting an offer with a realtor that doesn't necessarily know me, I want my lender to call, not only to pitch the offer and to pitch how strong my buyer is, but here's what I want them to tell that listing agent. Look, I don't know if you've worked with Jay, but his team did over 250 transactions the last 5 years in a row. If you have other offers on this property, I can tell you this: Jay knows how to get it closed. Jay knows how to manage the hurdles. Jay knows how to get over surprises and pitfalls. I don't think there's going to be any in this transaction, but if there is, he's going to land the plane on time better than these other agents. So using the lender to edify you with that listing agent to get you just a little bit more, there's a big part of that too.
And I will say, cross country mortgage, I started here in 2017, and the teammates that are on the call may have started in 17 or later. As you know, Jay, we've really grown tremendously from 5 billion to 36 billion last year. We are a known name, and just mentioning that definitely helps with our loan officers here at Cross Country, because the name is known and their name is known, right? We have a model of hiring people that are well respected in the market. People might call me to check in on another lender's pre-approval that's on our team or in one of our branches. So let's just talk about the last one real quick. Have proof of funds available. Sounds so simple, right? Especially if it's a cash offer. But having the proof of funds available, even for the down payment or appraisal gap coverage, why wait for them to ask you for it? Have it up front.
I'll tell you this: the offers that stand out big time for me, and I'll take a true case study here. We have a listing on the market right now at 900. We received an offer on it. They're putting 20% down. So not only did they send me the offer, and they sent me all the lending information detailing 20% down, all the terms, all the financing, they also sent me a copy of their bank statement showing me where the 20% is coming from. I don't know of a few agents that do this, because most agents say, well, if I got the lender's pre-approval letter or cover letter, if I got the lender's thing that says that they're qualified for an 80-20 loan, I don't have to show proof of funds on that 20. Okay, yeah, you don't. But wait till you get into it where you're sitting across from a seller and you're at the closing table and they don't close because you didn't check to see that they had proof for the down payment.
And if you're setting up an appraisal gap, you send in a statement that's got 150 grand if you got a $25,000 appraisal gap coverage, whatever it may be, but just being a step ahead, right?
It just shows, yeah, it just shows that it shows that you're looking into the process and you're trying to eliminate any hurdles for all parties. It just shows that you're a partner. Like, we both got a job to do. You want to get the best deal for your buyer. I want to get the best deal for my seller. But isn't the best deal for both parties that the actual sale happens? So, I mean, let's not forget that. My seller can get the most money for the property, but it does them no good if it doesn't close.
Okay, as we know, there's a statistic out there that 35% of the people that go through the process are happy. That means the other 65% are not. So being the professional, dotting the I's, crossing the T's, and going above and beyond is going to be more of a winning climate. Let's go to number 4, Jay. You know, I took from Jay's strategies a few of them here. He's got so many, but I thought this one was an interesting one. The dumpster clause. Jay, go into this.
Yeah, so the dumpster clause, basically, let's first talk about how you set this up, right? So this is that conversation to the seller agent prior to writing an offer. This is what you're, as Rick would always say, find a need and fill it. So recently in a sale, the seller's husband passed away. Pretty much everything in the house was clutter per se. And her biggest concern was she didn't have anybody to move. She was going into assisted living, so she didn't need anything in the house. Nothing was really of any value. So she's like, I can't physically move this stuff. So the buyer asked about this. I told the buyer, why don't you put a dumpster clause in there and I'll give you the language, but add it to the offer because that might carry some weight for my seller. Now, here's the exact clause we use, and I'll tell you, my seller took an offer $10,000 less because of this clause, because the other buyer wouldn't give it to him. And so basically what this states, it essentially states is, hey, look, you can take anything and everything with you that you're moving. You can also leave anything and everything that you want. And it's basically saying, as the buyer, I'll clean the house out for you. And I've had it where my sellers aren't necessarily looking for money, they're looking for convenience. They're looking for ease of sale. They're looking for peace. And people say you can't put a price on peace. Well, I've seen a price on it all the time. Sometimes it's 5,000, sometimes it's 10. In this case, my seller took $10,000 less to have this clause added to the sale so they didn't have to move any personal property.
So if I'm a buyer's agent and you're a listing agent and I'm submitting an offer on your listing, Jay, and I get out of that property and I call you, and by the way, I'm no experienced realtor here, but I call you and say, wow, Jay, that house looks like it needs a lot, but my client is interested, wants it. Obviously, we're going to do an inspection, whatever the terms may be. But wow, there's a lot of stuff to move out of that house. And then you present the dumpster clause, right?
Yep.
First of all, listing agent likely has never heard of this. And second of all, you might have just eased the burden for the listing agent and for the seller that they were going to have to think about and tackle on their own, correct?
Yes. And this is one of many clauses I've used. I think I sent you a document that has maybe 5 pages of clauses.
Which I can share with
I'd have to
everyone.
look. Yeah, so if you want that, get a hold of Jay and he'll get it to you. What I would tell you is this. Here's what I would tell you on a lot of this stuff. When you look at it, in our state, we're allowed to write clauses. I mean, essentially what we have is a limited license to practice law as long as we stay within the lines of the form we have, right? So you can get creative on some of it. One of the things that's not I don't know if it's on the sheet that I sent you. If it's not, I'll look at it and I'll send it to you. But here's one we've been using a lot lately because sellers are afraid they're not going to find a home. We use a suitable housing clause.
Yep.
We use that one a lot right now, basically telling the seller, hey, look, we want to buy your house. We'll give you 60 days to find another house or find suitable housing, rental, move in with friends, move in with parents. But we're the basic thing to take home here. The most important is look to find a need and fill it. Look for the seller's pain and fill it. Now you're only going to get that by having that conversation with the agent or by recognizing it and putting it in there. But I would even go as far as having the conversation with the agent's best, because you just have to ask, like, what's important to your seller?
It's almost like you need an a la carte menu, like you go to a steakhouse, right? And you have all these a la carte options where people can pick and choose. And like, hey, what works best for your seller? It's almost like check a box and let us know. We'll see how we can fill that need. All right.
One interesting thing, and I'll just mention this for those people that do a lot of listings. We rarely see an inspection clause. Now, I'm going to tell you why. It's not because the way you think it is. Here's why it is. As a listing agent, part of our process, we do a full inspection on every home we sell.
On the listing side.
On the listing side. And if it's got well and septic, we do that as well. We also do radon.
Who's paying for that?
I do. It's and I'll tell you, nobody else does it in my marketplace. But in the last 500 sales, we have not seen one inspection contingency.
Because you've hired your trusted inspector and provided it to the potential buyer.
It's 50 to 80 pages for just the inspection, 2 pages for the radon. Usually it's 4 pages for well and septic. So we do radon, well, septic, home inspection. We usually do those. What we don't do any type of sewer inspection, and we don't do anything like mold or whatnot like that. And then when we list the property, we put right in there, here's the inspection. And what you'll find out is most buyers, if they can save $700 by not doing the inspection, they don't.
So I'm assuming that you are using your number one and two, number 1, 2, and 3 home inspector that is a name that all these realtors know in your market.
Yep. And here's the interesting, you talk about building relationships. These 3, so I've got 3 home inspectors. I really use 1 and 2 primarily. The only time I use 3 is if the other 2 are either I need one quickly or they're out of town. They all know it. They all know each other. They use the exact same software. But here's what's interesting. The number 2 inspector, his entire business was probably built on doing home inspections for me. And then buyers come in there and look at it. And then the buyer ends up calling him on another transaction later on with a different agent. So I do get a discount for this because there's a huge value to the inspector. So I've got 2 inspectors. I guarantee both inspectors 100 inspections per year to get my discount.
All right, we've got about 10 minutes left, so let's get into the next one here. Number 5, I thought this was a really interesting one that I wanted to share as well. So take it away, Jay.
Yeah, so interesting side note on this one. A lot of my sellers, I do encourage a lot of my sellers to do a home warranty right up front with seller coverage and buyer coverage for 1 year. But if my seller won't do it, or if I'm making an offer on a listing that I don't have listed, I always write in the home warranty and I always offer up seller coverage. It's not very much to get to do the seller coverage, but it just tells the seller that you're negotiating out of good faith. It shows the seller that you want to protect them for the period of time from the time you wrote the offer to the time you're closing. And when it kicks in, this is a huge, huge benefit because Murphy's Law says if something's going to go wrong, if that hot water heater is going to expire, it's going to happen right before closing or right after the buyer moves their first box in. And so when you do seller coverage home warranty, it shows the seller that you want to protect them up until the day of closing as well. And you're coming from a buyer perspective.
So basically, the moment that offer is accepted, the buyer goes and buys this policy with the seller coverage and gives the certificate showing the coverage.
Yep, and most of these home warranty companies don't charge them until closing because they put it on the Alta, but the seller has coverage, and then it gets sent to the seller saying, hey, here's your coverage for the next 45 days or 30 days, whatnot.
That's fantastic. All right, so one thing that we're going to be rolling out here soon at Cross Country is the lender guarantee. Details will follow. It's probably going to be something looking like some sort of seller paid per diem if the transaction doesn't close on time as a result of our hand here at Cross Country. There are going to be some, particulars around it, but talk about how you look at those offers on your end in your market.
Well, for me, anytime there's a guarantee, it's a nice incentive for the seller, because you just don't know the sellers. You don't know what from a buyer perspective, you don't know what the seller's experience is. You don't know if they had an offer at one time 10 years ago and it didn't close, and they had everything in U-Haul vehicles and they had to go back. So anytime there's a guarantee, or whether it's a per diem, whether it's a flat rate, whether it's anything like that, anything that you can use. Now, ideally, you hope it never kicks in, but if it kicks in, it gives the seller a little peace of mind. And I think one of the problems when you look at earnest money, a lot of sellers think they get the earnest money if something happens, and then something happens and they don't get the earnest money. So then they're really upset. So whenever I see a lender comes across with a guarantee, I'm much more receptive to accepting that offer, because now I know if something does happen, at least my seller is going to be compensated. They're going to be compensated for whatever happened that we didn't close on time or whatnot. It's just a little good faith negotiation that puts people at ease.
So I always talk about with our team here, it's a layering effect, right? I always feel like it's a layering effect. Not one loan is going to fit every consumer. Not one tactic is going to fit every consumer. And that can obviously be said for the real estate side, whether it's a listing or a buyer. It's a layering effect, right? So when you look at things, Jay, listen, I know some realtors put together Excel spreadsheets, list out the 17 offers. They have their characteristics of the offer and they line it out.
That's what we do.
It's the layering effect of those pieces of the puzzle. And that's honestly what makes the difference between a professional and someone who just purchased their license, right?
What's super scary, here's what's super scary. We get a lot of offers on properties, and we have an Excel spreadsheet where we break it all out. I cannot tell you how many times there's two offers that are neck and neck. So there is so many times there's two offers that are all the way through neck and neck. Price, terms, bonuses, incentives, compensation. I like both agents. So it really gets down to the point where I can essentially flip a coin. They're that close. So if there's something in there that just gives you just that much more to go with, it could be the smallest detail can make the biggest difference between obtaining that property or not obtaining that property. And you call it a layering effect. I actually call it a stacking effect. And when you start to do all of these things, you get the compounding of the stacking effect goes towards your favor. So if you do everything but the phone call to the agent, you're probably good. But why take that chance? And it's like it builds upon itself.
Well, I'm going to mention, two things. One of which you said to me when we did our call to plan for this, which is you'll get 10 offers on a property. You might get one or two, maybe 3 calls from the listing agent, maybe a call here or there from the lender. But the agents that aren't calling you are emailing you time and time again. Did it get accepted? Did it get accepted? Did it get accepted? Right? And your head is spinning because you're like, all right, I'm fielding all these offers. You didn't have a time to call me and walk me through anything or build that rapport, that relationship, but you're hounding me to see if it gets accepted.
So what we do, because that's exactly what happens. It always blows me away how many phone calls I get when we tell them their offer is not accepted and how they want to try to work on getting it accepted now. And I'm going, little too late. Like, where was this when you submitted it? I mean, I've gotten offers where they just send it over an email, no phone call, no text, no smoke singles, nothing. All of a sudden, offer shows up, and I'm going, wow, I didn't even know they were interested. They never even filled out feedback. It's like, so yeah, so it happens all the time. And then when you tell them it's not accepted, then all of a sudden they're like, well, what can we do differently? Well, why didn't you have this call before? So here's another thing that I do, and it's about the relationship side. It sucks when I have 8 offers and I like every one of the agents. So we made it a practice that every time we have multiple offers, if the agents do not get the offer, so theirs does not get accepted, we send them, one state has a spot on the form and one state does not. Minnesota does not have a spot on the form. Wisconsin has a spot that says when it was presented and what happened. And then it requires the seller's initials. So on the Minnesota ones, I just write at the top, offer from Diane, presented at 536, rejected. And I have the seller's initial it. And then I send that back to the agent so they know I presented it. And then I always put, when we send it back, I do it in an email form. And I say, hey, thank you for the offer. I make sure they get their thank you card sent out to them, little Starbucks or Caribou or Dunn's. But then I always put in the email, here's my cell phone number. If you want to have more detailed conversation on why your offer wasn't chosen over another one, call me. I'll be very forthcoming. And then what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to help that agent so the next time they write an offer, they can get it accepted. Sometimes these agents have buyers that just won't learn, or they have buyers that won't listen to their agent. So then I'll say, tell you what, let me put in an email why your offer wasn't accepted, and you have my permission to forward that email directly to your buyer. Because sometimes I'm okay being the bad guy if it helps our relationship in the future. Because here's what I know, I'll probably never get to work with that buyer anyways. So I might as well be the bad guy if I can help you get an offer accepted down the road, and then it strengthens our relationship. I mean, I think about this relationship side of it, and that's the reason why we started with that first. One of my employees, Jordan, the reason why she came to work for me is about 4 years before she came to work for me, she made an offer on one of my properties. And I called her up, and it didn't get accepted, by the way. And she was making the offer for herself. And so I called her up and I'm like, why are you buying this? She's like, oh, we're getting into investing, me and my husband. And I walked through it and I go, this is a bad investment. So it's really good that your offer didn't get accepted. And I showed her why it was a bad investment. Then I told her if she wanted, come into my office someday, I'll spend a half hour to an hour with you, and I'll show you really how to start building wealth. I'll show you how to start saving money, how to budget. So I spent maybe an hour, hour and a half with her going over basic stuff that we learned in the core. And then that was it. 2.5 years later, she applied for a job I had out there. And the reason why she applied to work for me is because I took the time to teach her something that other people wouldn't teach her, and I had no benefit to gain. So I think everything comes back around if you do the right thing. And I think if you continuously do the right thing, build the relationship and have gratitude for it, you'll never not be busy. You'll never not be busy.
So Jay, just to recap here, we're an hour in. Really, first of all, thank you so much for doing this. We really, really appreciate it. We are going to get these strategies out to all of you who are on this call today. But, two things that really bubble up to the top for me with Jay is, again, he treats everyone as a partner, not as a vendor, not as a competitor. And he leads from a place of abundancy, right? He's not scared about his competitors in his market. If anything, he's embracing them and he's figuring out a way to win. All I know is if I could be up 11% in this market, I would be absolutely thrilled. And I feel like a lot of folks on this call would probably feel the exact same way. So we hope you take some of these tactics, implement them, speak with the loan officer that invited you to this call about any of them. We will get all of these out to you. And last but not least, Jay is the great guy that, you can tell just by the way of him talking about the core coaching and what it's done to change his life. He does not, folks, charge us for this event. What we do is we donate on behalf of Jay Fletch to one of his charitable organizations. So Jay, we really thank you. The check has already been sent in the mail. We appreciate that, and that you're giving back to your organizations and also to the realtors here that have joined the call. So thanks for spending an hour with us today. Let me check the quick chat.
I think it's Mandy. I think it was Mandy's organization that Mandy chose. So Mandy's one of my staff. She is a rock star. So, my staff list organizations they like to help. So, we thank you for that donation because it makes a big deal for Mandy. So yeah, so I appreciate that. And I love it when people take care of my team and my staff.
Cool. So we had a few thank yous, Jay. A lot of people expressing their gratitude. One client said, one realtor said they had a VA loan accepted with an offer because it was a cross-country lender and they knew they could rely on cross-country to get it done. And a lot of people are sharing their gratitude for being on the call today. So thank you, Jay. I know I'll see you at probably in October or November at the next event that we're at together, but really appreciate everyone tuning in on this call and being a part of it. And Jay, thank you so much. We'll let you back to your busy day there in Minnesota. Thanks, buddy.
It's an honor. Thank you.
All right. Appreciate it.